I'm speaking in good faith today with Arman Ariane from Claremont, California, in the Los Angeles area. Arman, thank you so much for making time today.
Thank you for having me.
Arman is a businessman there in Claremont, and he's a past president of the California Zoroastrian Center, a council member on the Zoroastrian Studies Council at Claremont Graduate University, and he's spoken about Zoroastrianism across the U.S., and he was featured actually in Morgan Freeman's National Geographic series, The Story of God. We'll talk about that a little bit in just a moment. Arman, did you grow up in a religious environment?
No, actually, I didn't. My parents were more secular,
Mm-hmm.
and they believed in God, but nothing was ever expected of me to do, pray, or go to a mosque or anywhere.
I was asked recently, as we were doing some preparation for some things we were doing for the podcast, a listener asked, who do you want to talk to who you haven't yet? And I said, I need to talk to someone about Zoroastrianism. So thank you so much. We've been looking for someone to speak with, and you're the perfect person to do that.
Thank you.
I wonder,
We have become a endangered species, kind of.
yes. Yeah, the reading I've been doing and a current National Geographic article is quite excellent that you pointed us to, telling about the history, but also how things stand at the present. It sounds like you're part of what they describe as a resurgence or actual growth here in the US, where it's declining in numbers in other places in the world. How did you come to Zoroastrianism? How did you find it?
I found Zoroastrianism really through Cyrus the Great. When
The Persian.
Yes, the Persian emperor. So what happened was, as a kid in Iran, so we learned about when I was a teenager. Of course, we learned a little bit, not really that much, especially in elementary school, about Cyrus the Great. But when I was about 12 years old, there was a big celebration for the 25th century celebration of Cyrus the Great. And I remember the Persian emperor, the king of Iran, how he had invited many statesmen from all over the world to meet in Persepolis, the capital of the Persian Empire, and how he paid tribute to Cyrus the Great as the king of kings. And a couple of years later, when I was like 14 years old, my family sent me to a private boarding school, Christian boarding school in Vienna, Austria. Of course, because this was a Christian school, I learned again about Cyrus the Great in the Bible. We studied the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, and of course the New Testament. And here, Cyrus the Great is, in Hebrew, he's the Messiah or the Messiah, and I was surprised. So here's another Persian guy like myself, who we thought he's a king, but over here in the civilized West, he's the Messiah. His title was actually handed down to Jesus in the New Testament, and that was very surprising to me. Cyrus the Great created the first Declaration of Human Rights. He had women's rights. He got rid of slavery. He freed the Jews from Babylon. In Isaiah 42 to 45, he's held at the highest honor. And that was very interesting to me. Those were all things that I had not learned in my native country or the native country of Cyrus. And to see such high level of respect for a Persian king in a civilized Western culture was very surprising to me. So that's when I discovered that the founder of federalism, the founder of the first human rights, was actually a Zoroastrian, and also because of being in the country of Austria, the country of music, the sound of music. We had the famous symphony by Strauss, Also sprach Zarathustra,
Right.
which is known in the United States more as the music to the movie called The Space Odyssey 2000. So and that was I loved that symphony and that masterpiece, and that was very interesting. So more and more I'm discovering in the Western civilization about some attributes that had started in my part of the woods, something that I had not learned in my native country, and here I'm learning it in the West, in a Christian school, and then of course also the famous symphony by Mozart, the Zauberflöte, which is also about Zarathustra, and then of course the famous novel by Friedrich Nietzsche, known as Thus Spoke Zarathustra, or Also sprach Zarathustra. And all that was guiding me to want to know more about Zoroastrianism. And of course, we had religious classes, Bible studies, and where I discovered that the three magi's, the three wise men, were actually Zoroastrian priests coming from the east, following the star to Bethlehem to witness the birth of Christ.
So many connections.
Very many connections, and that was very
Maybe
surprising.
let me take just a moment and then pick up this story right where you are. But for our listeners who might not be familiar, Zoroastrianism is what we call it in English. There was a Zoroaster or Zarathustra. This is the same person, correct?
Correct.
And would you say the founding prophet or founding leader?
Correct. So most of the names we use are in Greek. So Zoroaster or Zoroastrianism are Greek names. Cyrus is the Greek name for Persian Kurosh or Hebrew Koresh. Or, for instance, so Zarathustra would be Zarathustra would actually be the correct name, or the non-Greek name for the founder of the religion.
And could you just in a paragraph talk about when that happened and how the founding happened?
So we don't exactly know. We know that it's at least 3,800 years old, but it could be much older than that. Zoroastrianism has been intact. So the Zarathustra conveyed his message in 17 songs. And of course, the later scriptures have added much to it, but Zarathustra's message is only in 17 songs, and it's just a thought provoker. We can talk about that a little bit later, but if I could go back to my personal experience, how I
Yes, when you've
discovered.
been learning about this
Right.
All of these connections you're talking about.
This was during a time where in my native country, um, we had a revolution and my country became a theocracy, meaning that the clergy took over the government.
Right.
And that was another thought provoker, right? So right in the midst of, now I'm 19 years old, and I am discovering that this is my background, what I'm studying in Europe about the past, the history, and here what I see on the news that now we have a theocracy in place as the government, and that's when many of us at the time were going through a roller coaster um, in terms of discovering about where we are going from here, and um, and then that's really what I discovered about Zoroastrianism. Um, that I basically at that point, when I found Zoroastrianism, it was like that's what I believe. That's what I've been saying. I don't think I ever converted to Zoroastrianism.
Hmm.
Um, I think most people don't. We are who we are. We just discover our comfort zones and ourselves more than anything else. Uh,
I love how you state that.
thank you. I have an interesting background. I had one great grandfather who was a Bahai, a grandfather who was a Sunni. My parents were Shia Muslim, and I was brought up in a Christian boarding school. Uh, and one of my best friends was Jewish that I grew up with. So
So,
I felt very, very comfortable um, with doesn't matter who the person's background is. I think there are certain codes. There are certain. I think it's a culture. There are people that we connect that could be totally from a different background. Um, but no matter what church temple we attend, what communities we come from, I think there are a lot of things that we have in common: aspiration for life, culture, nature, and so on. What was interesting to me about Zoroastrianism um, was the concept of God to start with, because I always,
Ahura Mazda.
yes, I had always that doubt of, I really truly wanted to believe in a God, but I needed proof. I
Mm.
just, I was trying to ignore it growing up. That don't think that way. There is a God, and He's an Almighty God. But when I discovered the way God is described by Zarathustra, then it made sense to me. So
What is that description?
so Ahura Mazda is the name of God. So Mazda, Da in Sanskrit means wisdom. Da. Um, and in modern Persian, Danesh means wisdom, or Dana means wisdom, and it's an Indo-European language. Mass means massive. So mass da means massive knowledge. Um, so if you go to Mazda.com, it takes you to the automobile Mazda.com. And on the top, there used to be, at least I didn't see it last time I visited, but it said history of Mazda, and then you could search for it, and there was a write up about the vision, and it said that the car is named after the Zoroastrian god of Ahura Mazda. So the
Mm.
long story, the shorter story is that they liked the name because there was a Parsis Indian In India, there was a company that sold light bulbs to this Japanese company. They liked the name, so they bought the company out and they named the car Mazda. But anyhow, going back to Mazda, um, so mass knowledge. But at that point, the God is called mass knowledge, or the most massive knowledge, um, was interesting because the system that you and I, the technology that you and I are using to communicate. You're in Utah, I'm in California, and this podcast, this is amazing, right? This took a lot of knowledge. This took a lot of knowledge to create that, our conversation. What kind of a
Right.
knowledge would it take to create everything else, to create what we call Asha? Asha means Mother Nature, the truth, the facts. It must be massive. It must. So the best way to describe that kind of a knowledge that it took to create Mother Nature must be massive. So mass da makes sense. But now, what do I care? Why should I care about this mass knowledge? I understand it exists. It's all around me. But so what? But what makes this mass da interesting is the ahura, which means the essence. The essence of this mass da is very life friendly. it it likes us. It likes our planet. It likes our world. It likes our oceans. It likes our trees, and it likes this whole existence of life. We see it everywhere we look. I'm very much fascinated by camouflage. So the current issue that we are in of National Geographic, of 2024, May 2024, which is this next month, and there's a nice article about Zoroastrianism. The cover page of that issue is an octopus. And National Geographic is currently running series on octopus. It's fascinating. If you get to watch it on National Geographic channel, or if you get this issue of May 2024, honestly, I don't know which one is more inspirational. To me, the first part of the octopus, or the second article, which is about us, the Zoroastrians. So that's Mother Nature, and it's all about us. So now we have a name for God that I can scientifically not deny, which is the essence of a supreme intellect. That's the Zoroastrian God. Ahura, the essence; massive; Da, wisdom.
Besides the part of knowledge and wisdom, for a lot of people, spirituality also includes, I guess, what they would call some connection with the heart.
Of course.
Was there something when you found these teachings that also connected that way?
Yes, and that's Asha.
Hmm.
Asha is the first thing I discovered about Zoroastrianism, not Ahura Mazda. Asha exactly translated or described, it's a keyword, because keywords should not, I believe, be translated. Keywords are not like words like names, like colors. Say, for instance, yellow in German gelb, in Persian zard. You can easily translate it because you're describing a color. But halal, haram, karma, kosher, those are key words, and they should be understood and not just translated. And
Hmm.
so are those words in Zoroastrianism, just like in Buddhism. Asha, and once we understand the meaning of those words, we should just keep using them. Um, Asha exactly means to be at the right place at the right time, take a constructive action, and have the best results. And that's Mother Nature. That's exactly what happened in the nature. As we know, our planetary system, how the Earth, our moon, and everything was created. It's Mother Nature. Simply translated, Asha means truth or fact. Um, most scholars like to translate it as what is. So the first thing I discovered, and to answer your question, I really enjoyed about it, is that I discovered that I am and you are, and everything around me exists. So that's when the question came up. How did we come about? How is this whole thing created? So Asha is the center, I would say, core of the understanding of Zoroastrianism. Now that I have discovered Asha, and I know I am and you are, we are both talking right now, and now I know that there is an essence of a supreme intellect that would want you and I have this conversation. The next question is, what else does he want me to do? So that's how, what I was saying earlier, that I never had to convert. It's just my this is something, a discovery, a personal discovery, that my guess would have been at that point was that Asha would want Ahura Mazda would want me to become Asha compatible. If
This makes me
go
go ahead.
go ahead.
This makes me curious about are there particular daily or weekly rituals that you do to feel connected to whatever that divine knowledge and wisdom is?
Yes. So that's a very good question, Steve, because um, in let's look at the motto of the Zoroastrian prayer, which in my opinion, if we wanted to also discuss if there is a miracle in Zoroastrianism, I would call this prayer a miracle, and I tell you later why. So the prayer, which is called Asham Vuhu, goes like this: good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Righteousness is the highest virtue. It leads to enlightened happiness. This radiant happiness comes to the person who is righteous for the sake of righteousness alone, and not for any rewards or fear of punishment. What I find most fascinating about this motto prayer, it totally connects you to Asha, what is. It conveys, it's totally composed in present term. It doesn't say righteousness was the highest virtue. Righteousness is the highest virtue. It leads to enlightened happiness, not that it will someday in the future in a different place. It leads right away. It leads to enlightened happiness. This radiant happiness comes to the person, not that it came or it will come, but it comes to the person who is righteous for the sake of righteousness alone, and not for any rewards or fear of punishment. The other thing that I find so this must have been a Zoroastrian influence on Zen Buddhism. As we know, Zoroastrianism, being the first monotheistic religion, had the most impact on the Abrahamic religions to the west and Eastern thoughts in the East. So this power of now must have had a great impact on Zen Buddhism. The other thing that makes this prayer very interesting is that it's totally universal. There's no mention of any place, geographical place. And it should be, it was composed for humanity and not any, it's not tribal, because the name of the prophet is not there. As you and I know, in most religions, as you're praying, the name of the prophet is repeatedly is repeated constantly. In this case, you don't hear the name of the religion. You don't hear, there's no mention of the prophet. But what's most interesting, where's God in this prayer? It's you and I who have to become godlike and take action. So it can be adopted by many nations, cultures, color. It's not tribal, and it does not have an expiration date. This was composed at least 4,000 years ago, and it's still very relevant today.
It's intriguing to me how the ideas of light and dark and of good, evil, and what you've been telling us about the acceptance of how things are, the influence that has been on the development of Islam and Christianity and Judaism, as well as now you've tied in Zen, Buddhism. I am curious, um, and the idea of being motivated by righteousness for righteousness' sake, that, as you said, not out of fear or hope for a reward, but because it is what is best. And I'm wondering if, for instance, if I came to, is it a temple?
Yeah.
Which you'd call the place of worship? What type of a service or prayer, or what would happen if I came to such a meeting?
So the symbol of Zoroastrianism. So here's something very interesting. So I have a class that I introduce to young people about Zoroastrianism, and I give them the power. I say, let's as a group start a religion together. Let's start a religion for future. And we go through what would you want to call the religion? What would you like to write in your scripture? What would you like to do at your temple? Right? And we go on and on. So one of them is, you come to the temple, right? So what do we need? We need a ritual, right? First of all, what do you want as our symbol? The symbol is very important. As you and I know, like for instance, the cross in Christianity, right? It represents salvation, and Jesus sacrificing himself for our sins. So the symbol talks a lot about a religion. So what do we want as a symbol for our religion? It would be, I cut it short. It's enlightenment. Zoroastrianism, if our ultimate goal is to become compatible to Asha, if we want to be compatible to the world that we live in, to the many cultures, the many people, the many animal kingdom, then we need the wisdom to be able to become Asha compatible. And for that, you need intellect. If you want to understand Mazda, if you want to understand Ahura Mazda, the essence of the supreme intellect, we would need to gain as much intellect as we can. The symbol of intellect is fire, is the light, right? So, and in that class, sometimes we have that class at night. I go and turn off the lights, and I go, okay, you guys all move around, and so change your seat. Joe, change your seat with Jim, and Scott, change your chair with Natalie. And then, we have laughter, the chairs are falling, on the ground. But then I go to the wall, I rub my hand on the wall until I find the switch and I turn on the light. And then you can move freely without hitting anything. That's the power of knowledge and vision. Once you are aware of your surroundings in the room, then you understand Asha. So the symbol of Zoroastrianism is the light. And as a matter of fact, all elements are precious in the Zoroastrian tradition, including earth, water, air, but most precious is the fire. Because you turn off the sun, we are not going to last for a very long time. Right. And if you want to believe in a Big Bang, it started with just a ball of fire. It has been used. I mean, the only difference really that our brain did as a gift to us, and the difference we have with the animal kingdom, is how we use the fire. Because the massive, heavyweight dinosaurs, the T-Rex, terrifying, huge. When it saw the forest on fire, they ran away. You know what we did? We grabbed it, we put it under a rocket and went to the moon. We used the fire to advance our technology, our knowledge, our culture, our species. So that's why the fire is the most precious element in the Zoroastrianism. But it really means it represents enlightenment. As a matter of fact, if many reputable universities, colleges all over the country, all over the world, they have a flame in their logo
for knowledge,
for wisdom. So that is the symbol of Zoroastrianism. So back to your question, when we meet at the temple, we light up a fire, which is normally on. If you go to a major fire temple, say for instance the one in Udvada, India, or the one in Yazd, Iran, they've been burning for thousands of years. So that's what it represents. And Stephen, some of your question when I apologize when it takes, my answers are so lengthy because Zoroastrianism, even though it had a huge influence on the Abrahamic religions, it's not an Abrahamic religion.
Right.
It's probably closer to Eastern thought. So it is much easier for a Muslim to give a talk at a Christian church or a Christian person to describe Christianity at a Jewish temple, because the Abrahamic family, they are more related and it's much easier to understand. Zoroastrianism is a different perspective, right? And that's why it may have a better understanding. For instance, many people believe that Zoroastrians worship fire. Well, they don't.
It's just a symbol.
It's a symbol of enlightenment. I don't even think, like in the Persian language, which Zoroastrianism grew within the Achaemenid Empire, we don't even have a word for worship. The word that we use in Persian for worship is parastesh, which means to nurture. A nurse is a parastar, and worship is parastesh, to basically caretaker. We are caretakers of the fire. We are caretakers. Because in Zoroastrianism, the idea is try to gain enough knowledge to at least get closer to that mass intellect and have a better understanding of his essence, Ahura Mas Da. So,
So
go.
I'm wondering if, and I apologize, our time is so short because I would love to speak at length with you. Maybe I'll get to in the future. I hope to.
Okay.
Um, to take this cosmic insight and knowledge, how does it practically affect, for instance, in the way that you raise your children or that you act in your business, those type of daily things? What practices or knowledge affect how you do those things?
So nobody is born a Zoroastrian.
Hmm.
It's something that we have to choose to be. Um, we are born um, as human beings, and we have to choose what we want to be. Um, Naturally born, I think religion is geography.
Hmm.
If you are born in Rome, you're most likely Catholic. If you are born um, in Israel, you're a Jew. If you're born south of the Persian Gulf, you're most likely a Sunni Muslim. If you're born north of the Persian Gulf, you're most likely a Shia Muslim. So religion, we start off with geography. Zoroastrianism has to be chosen. So at some point, when a child is ripe at his own will, they can choose to become a Zoroastrian, which is a pledge. You put a white shirt, which is called sedre. It's white for its purity. Zoroastrians were always white, including funerals. We don't mourn when there is a funeral because death is just part of life. Life would have never existed without death. Um, I mean, new stars are born because a massive star dies, and that's all around us. That's we are going back to Asha now. So what we teach our children is that you are a part of Asha, and the goal is to become Asha compatible. I took my kids one time to an acorn festival, and there was a Native American priest who was they were singing oh and playing their instruments, and then when I heard that translation of their prayer, I went up to that priest and I said, you know, the whole time I'm thinking that Zoroastrianism, I have I know how and when it influenced the Western Abrahamic religions and the Eastern thoughts, but I don't see any connections to the Native Americans. And here what you recited was so Zoroastrian. And the and the Native American priest looked at me and he said, "But of course." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "If you're talking about this planet," and he pointed out up, "this sky, this earth, and you and I, this species, our proposal should be the same for a better life, for a better world." So, and I see this in many, many traditions. We may look at it in a different ways, but in Zoroastrianism, what's more important is self. What, say, for instance, the Mormon would call um, um, the free agency. It is that self. We are in the driver's seat, and we need to take charge of and heal the world together with that knowledge.
I'm wondering about, and you can correct me. I have loved learning about this and want to delve in more. I read that at one point there were 21 different books of scripture, but Alexander, that some call the Great and some call the Cursed, depending on whether he was conquering you or not, destroyed all but one of those books that remains as a book of scripture. Is that telling accurate?
I I don't know. It's why would he destroy all the whole library and save one? I don't know, but Zarathustra was
I
so
get
smart that the Gathas, which is the songs of Zarathustra, that earlier I said, if we wanted to have a miracle in Zoroastrianism, it should be the Gathas, because um, where the Middle East is located, it's wide open and everybody has been through it. Alexander the Not So Great, the Mongols, the Genghis Khan, the Arab conquest, many things have been destroyed. But what Zarathustra did, he composed his entire message in 17 songs. They're songs,
mm,
right? That's another influence that you have in many religions where you sing, including the azan in Islam and the hymns that we sing
right.
in the church. So the Zarathustra's message was actually saved in poetry and in a very specific uh, uh, rhyme that cannot be forgotten. So, for instance, if I start singing you a song that you heard when you were a kid and you have never heard it again since then, and I would change the message, I would change the lyrics in that song, you would wait, you would say, no, 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 wait, that's not how it goes.
Right.
So
Right.
Zarathustra actually installed an antivirus in his message by composing poetry with a very specific ending and rhyme that could be preserved. Even though Alexander destroyed everything, and then, of course, Genghis Khan and the Arab conquest after that, but the message of Zarathustra, which are inspiring also because you're singing, was preserved in people's mind, something that was recited daily, uh, including that same prayer that Ashambuhu that we went over earlier.
Do you have a favorite or something that right now is something that you rehearse in your mind that is meaningful to you that you could tell me about?
I Not just me, but most of us, um, our first prayer is Ashambuhu, which is about one person, right? Righteousness comes to the person who is righteous for the sake of righteousness alone and not for any rewards or fear of punishment. The second prayer, now suddenly we are a group, is that we should pick our leaders based on their righteousness, based on their act. In Zoroastrianism, you never need confession because the motto of Zoroastrianism is a very specific order. It's good thoughts first, good words, good deeds. That's when you go to a temple, right? You see it on the top that says good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Of course, these are key words. It could be translated as constructive thoughts, constructive words, and constructive deeds. And again, these are all a part of Asha, right? When we say constructive, meaning to take you become Asha compatible. So a student, before he takes an action, should think, then talk to a mentor before taking any action. A patient should talk to a doctor before taking any action, and so on. So the order of the motto, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, practice in daily basis is very, very important. Ashambuhu, which is the personal prayer. And right after that, now that we have become a community, now that we as an individual have decided that I will have good thoughts, good words, good deeds, and I would follow Ashambuhu, now I'm a part of a community. Now that we are more than one person, that means that we will naturally, you see it all over Asha, even in animal kingdom, right? There's an alpha wolf. So that person, we need to elect him based on his words, thoughts, words, and actions. So that's another favorite that I have. And when we watch the news all over the world, the despair, the hunger, the wars, discrimination. That's when we see how important and relevant those prayers still are. Um, and back to your question, the part that I enjoy the most about it is that um, we don't in Zoroastrianism we need to take actions ourselves. The concept of a Messiah in Zoroastrianism um, is not for a Messiah that would come back someday, but we are supposed to be a Messiah. Every one of us has the duty of becoming a Messiah to refresh the world, as Zarathustra calls it.
Thank you so
Of
much.
course.
I'm wondering, very famously, Morgan Freeman recently was with National Geographic talking in his series, The Story of God, and said that he related and felt closely aligned with the teachings he had learned from Zoroastrianism. And I am curious, for those of us who are new to learning about this tradition, is there something you would want us to know? Now, you've described a lot very beautifully. Maybe you've already done this, but is there something that you wish we would know about this tradition and the teachings?
You know, Morgan Freeman is a great thinker, and he has always been fascinated by existence, by us, by and God. He even played God one time in a movie,
Yes, he's
and
often referred to as the voice of God.
and he has the voice of God too, of course. Um, and I've always watched his documentaries on about universe on National Geographic channel as well, and he's always been fascinated. And I think the part that um, he enjoyed the most is how fresh and um, the oldest monotheistic religion in the world, how current it can be,
Mm.
how up to date it can be, um, and how it puts the responsibility of healing the world on us and not necessarily um, waiting for a miracle to happen, for our prophets to come back and drag us out of misery and despair. We need to take charge of that ourselves. How? With Ashambuhu and by choosing righteous leaders um, who we choose based on their thoughts, words, and actions. And I think that's what he really captured him. And then he came out and he says, uh, "I'm a Zoroastrian," and I think he is. You know, we run. I mean, we like to label ourselves all the time. Um, that's just, I think, our nature. That's, I think, what the world and politics kind of impose on us. But you know, I when somebody asks me if I'm a Zoroastrian, many times I say, you know, I would like to, and most days I am.
Most days.
You know, it you know it is we don't have to be labeling ourselves. It Many attributes of so many different cultures can be brought into our families, into our own actions. We can learn from each other. But ultimately, as we said earlier in Ashram Buhu, the name of the religion, the prophet, is not mentioned. Not even God is mentioned. But it puts so much responsibility on us. I never forget. I caught my son one time talking to his friend. He was a little kid, and he he was telling his friend, "Do you know why I like to be a Zoroastrian?" And I was really curious, and I tried to listen to what he's going to say. And the friend said, "Why?" He said, "Because you don't have to do anything. It's so easy. It, you know." Then of course, he was very young, and then later on, I told him, I said, you said that when you were a kid, but it's actually very difficult because of all the responsibilities you have. It's not just about memorizing some prayers and then asking God for favors. When we pray, we don't ask God for favors. It is really meditation and help us to gain more knowledge so that we can become Asha compatible and so that we can understand a little bit better the essence of the mass intellect.
Thank you very much. Arman Ariane is a businessman from Claremont, California, past president of the California Zoroastrian Center. And you've been so kind to take time to give us just a little bit of insight. I can tell I have lots more I need to learn. But thank you so much for speaking with me today in good faith.
Thank you so much.